Well, again, welcome all of you to Interfaith Temple, and thank you so much, Unique, for that extraordinary moment of purification and invigoration, bringing the white light down and going into the depths of the earth to bring up that sacred fire. There is so much power and possibility that lies beneath the surface. And so today we're celebrating this dark wisdom and how the encounter with dark wisdom, with the shadow side, with contrast, can lighten our hearts and bring more light into the world. It seemed an appropriate thing to reflect upon at this time of the year as we are in the wake of solar eclipse and in that season between equinox and the upcoming solstice, where the sun will actually be at its height in the northern hemisphere, and below in the southern hemisphere will come to its darkest day. What we are experiencing worldwide is profoundly connected. We don't just live in our own realm, but we share community and realm and divine presence with one another. There's a well-circulated talk of Alan Watts where he recounts the parable of the astronaut who goes to space and returns to Earth. And the people ask him, "Have you been to heaven and have you seen God?" And the astronaut replies, "Yes, I have. She was black." Perhaps not what the folks on Earth were expecting to hear. The parable of the astronaut offers a contrast to one typical definition of a God, the one who's authoritarian, paternalistic, a deity, surrounded in light and ruling over realms of glory. We'll be exploring the divine feminine element next month in our upcoming temple service led by students. So I won't go into that today. But Watts poses the question, what if God is an unfathomable darkness? What if we were to enter into that contrast, enter into what's unknown rather than our epithets and on our understandings of what is known? So many of our conceptual models of God and fallen creation, heaven and the pit, even the male-female dualities, anima, animus of Jung, are provided in binaries and in dualistic terms. Perhaps one of the greatest emerging revelations of this time, as we somewhat explored in our past temple service last month, Trans Lives Are Sacred, is that the trans identity and non-binary identity, maybe even integral identity, is emerging. And I hope that it will help shape some of these models and these ideas of binaries for us as those voices, marginalized communities' voices are centered in our dialogue. But often our lives are experienced in dualisms. Many of us on the journey of transcendent and living into authenticity are in the process of integrating many different things. Integration of so many dualisms. Transcendence is a process of moving across dualism into non-dual awareness. Yet again, we arrive at another dual reality and experience. It's a process of becoming. So we selected this image of the yin-yang here and this contemplation of uh, night and day, kind of symbolizing, representing the non-dual and how duality itself stirs the cosmic, stirs the non-dual. And this is at play in various ways within our lives. We have various rituals within our many religious traditions for examining our conscience and for encouraging positive behaviors. But so often this focuses on solutions for a problem, an act of contrition, an act of atonement, rather than focused on the awareness and the arc of the process. Some years ago, I was inspired by grief psychologist, psychotherapist Francis Weller, who creates these deep places for people to encounter all sorts of grief through art, through discussion, through community circling. And at the end of the day, there was a funeral rite, a liturgy, a time of wailing at the wall, where all griefs, environmental, griefs of loss, yes, the kind of grief we often acknowledge in our society, but other griefs, like the grief for the things that we expected when we came out of the womb. We're hardwired to be fed. We're hardwired for love. And the ways that we bear grief in not receiving those things or having to strive for them. Today, I'd like to provide a few revelations from the dark side, from the shadow of being in the dark and not knowing. It's the way that Michael Meade, he's a great mystic and storyteller of today's time, refers to as dark wisdom. It's what we might refer to as the via negativa, the way through the negative. It's a journey of transcendence. One of those is the power of not knowing. In order to deeply listen, to hear, to observe, we can assume a posture of not knowing, rather than attempting to apply our knowledge in every given moment. That may empower us to discover a different truth, a deeper reality, an unforeseen path, buried layers beneath the realm of what we think we know and what we think we are hearing. It's one of the fundamental qualities we're encouraged to embrace as ministers and chaplains, but it also belongs to all of us in our relationships or caregiving, relationships with partners, children, family, society, community. That rather than applying our own understanding or advice giving to another individual, that we're being fully present in unconditional positive regard. That unconditional positive regard is also a part of the power of not knowing. And it's capable of entering into the darkest spaces of the unknown. What's not known to us may feel uncomfortable for us and for those that we're serving, those we're connecting with. But we're able to develop a practice of reflective communication that enables us to go deeper into decoding the metaphorical layers of communication, a practice that enables us to suspend our inner story and give way to a new creation, co-creation, new narrative, co-construction. We're able to embrace a posture of curiosity and not knowing, an enabling of revelation. So this first revelation from the dark side, from the nothingness, from the not knowing, we find that knowledge can come of not knowing. Wisdom can come of not knowing. It is a principle of contrast and void. We embrace the dark here rather than trying to explain it away. Another revelation is that of the disorienting dilemma and its worth of unlearning. We have to be open to hearing the ways in which we are harming other individuals. We have to be open to hearing about the ways that we're projecting darkness into the world. We have to be open to claiming our darkness in order to do restorative work. We have to be open to examining our implicit biases, our explicit biases. It's not necessarily bad to have a preference about something or a manner of being, but a lot of this work of confronting implicit bias comes from being educated in community and being open to receiving feedback. This is entering into what Jack Nazirau, author of the Transformative Learning Theory, if I don't bring him up in every homily, there must be something wrong with me that day. I just have to get it in. He calls it the disorienting dilemma. That's dark wisdom. It's the same kind of dark wisdom of the dark night of the soul that we hear so often, that our mystics have had to walk across in order to come to a place of insight, to walk through illness into health. If we aren't doing this, if we're not questioning these implicit biases, these meaning perspectives that we have, then we're allowing those implicit factors to rule our lives. We're allowing those implicit biases to shape our relationship with the earth, with ecosystem, with all manners of consciousness. A third revelation from the shadow, from the dark, from not knowing, is the power that it has to cultivate awareness for us of our dysregulated emotional states, our griefs, our impulsivities, our intrusive thoughts. As we reflect upon these things, sit with them, acknowledge them, name them, we can develop an awareness of our triggers, our growth edges, and our darker habits or tendencies, which can inform our practice and the strategies that we need to develop and to hone in order to maintain a state of regulation that's more life-affirming, in order to maintain a state of compassionate action for ourselves and others, in order to live into abundance. When we dip into that dysregulated space and we don't have the tools, the strategies, it can be difficult to get out of that space. Just like the realm of the positive, in the realm of the negative, we can enter into a flow state, a slipstream that carries us much further than we want to go. Deeper, darker. So when we think about prayer, or when we tend to seek various medicines or employ various coping strategies, when we're engaging in acts of contrition, it's so often in response to the negative. In an effort to push the darkness away, in an effort to hold on to something in a spaciousness that feels too broad and too wide. An emptiness as we're trying to gain a foothold. It's a reminder of why we must practice in the good times. We need to be in practice, in prayer, developing coping strategies for ourselves in the good times, carrying that mindfulness in, developing our bag of tricks so that when the floor falls out, we have a beacon, a practice that we can come back to. But we'll have to look into the dark and see what those triggers are for us and where they're coming from in order to gain that dark wisdom. Beneath the soil in the darkness is where life happens. It's rich in minerals and potential. It's the cradle of life. We know that even on the summer solstice, and we're starting to see on the earth the days grow longer and longer here in the Northern Hemisphere, that once we reach the summer solstice, it is all a gradual descension into darkness from there. And that each day as the sun wanes, the possibility for its waxing increases. This is why the most improved award in school really should be the highest honor of achievement rather than that of academic excellence for the one who has not demonstrated the ability to rebound. For as we continue to wax and manifest into positivity without looking into that dark, that will not always be sustainable. And then what coping strategies have we developed? What do we know about how to work with ourselves in the dark? We know in my work at the San Francisco Night Ministry, if I'm working with somebody who's in the midst of active suicidal ideation, that holding up the light and saying, things are going to get better from here. You have so much you have so much going for you, isn't the right way to begin that conversation. Puts us into battle again. It's important for us to sit with them and to acknowledge, to listen into, feel into the darkness with them and affirm the darkness. And from gaining that wisdom, then we find ourselves in a position where we might be able to develop a plan for when this comes next time. And we always know in that situation that time is on our side. The longer that we can be present and show presence, we're helping pull someone out of that moment of despair. But we have to dig deeper into it. In all of this, and in our fractured world, which I was reminded of this morning, actually, in a previous sermon I received from Pastor Bob, also the music director at a local ELCA church here in California. In the fractured world, part of our work, our calling is love. That's what bridges the gap. But that requires that we look at our fear and our anxiety and the ways that we're seeing darkness and those that we're afraid of, those communities that we don't understand. As we're building a bridge of love, a bridge over troubled water in this case, that will be the reflection after I end here in just a moment. We're on a journey of transcendence and connection and love and embrace. If we stay on one side of the water and we don't lay me down like a bridge over troubled water, we'll only ever know one side. Transcendence isn't just a process of ascending vibrationally. It's actually about moving straight across, cutting straight through the thick of it. And we have to be careful that we lay that bridge down Otherwise, we'll can drown in the water on our way, or only know one side, what's comfortable. And that's a limitation, a self-limitation. Carl Jung discussed taming the dragon. Sometimes it's slaying the dragon. It's not really just to subdue it or take it under your control. The power of the dragon is to be able to ride your dragons, over the troubled water. So learn how to ride your dragon and honor the wisdom that comes from looking at what's ugly within ourselves and in the world. Honor the void and how it calls you to know the non-dual divine power. It's present in life and present infinitely beyond anything of our wildest imagination. Amen.